We're gonna give you 4 drills to improve your max speed, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so when we're thinking about speed, we have to look at it as simply as possible. That's one benefit I have here, is that I'm not the brightest individual, so I like to have a little bit of translation when you start to read all this research, right? So it's sort of like, it gets confusing. You see F equals ma. I wasn't good at physics, so I didn't fully understand that growing up. But now, if we look at it through sprinting, through that lens, force equals mass times acceleration. So what that means is essentially every time that you put action into the planet, into the earth, you get a reaction back, and that reaction can be equal to mass times acceleration, okay? So one other aspect here is looking at it with the idea of impulse, okay? So impulse would be the amount of force that you can put, in this case, into the ground over a period of time. A lot of people will focus on that peak force, but in reality, peak force doesn't necessarily matter as much as the overall force over a period of time. If we have someone who puts a very large amount of force into the ground for a short period of time, for a very short period of time relative to the task, then they're not gonna have as big of an impulse, and then therefore they won't be able to cover as much ground as someone who can put more force or the same amount of force into a longer period of time. And when we're talking about sprinting and mechanics around running, that window of time is very, very, very short. But if we can lengthen that grounding period well with good mechanics and with good drills, now we can put more force during that short period of time, or we can lengthen that period of time, okay? So it comes back to the amount of force that we can put into the ground and the period of time that we're doing that. So all of these drills that we're gonna be doing today are going through that lens. If we can master all these concepts when we're doing the drills, that's gonna help us do them more effectively, and then it's gonna transfer better over to our speed work. 90. Yeah. And the toe here, this toe up, so then as you switch, it's almost a flat foot landing. The whole goal with this drill, with the water bag switches, is that if we can stay a little bit flat, not entirely flat, but and upright, we're gonna be able to put a little bit more force into the ground. Again, it goes back to ground force application. And this movement is gonna help him with his peak speed, with his maximal mechanics. Okay, so he was doing 3 steps there. Ideally, this is a very challenging movement, especially with the hydro weight. So what Cooper just did is he went through with 3 steps, okay? 3 steps, switch, 3 steps, switch, 3 steps, switch. What I wanna see is, ideally, he gets down to 2 steps, switch, 2 steps, switch. So your left leg, Cooper's left leg there, he got 2. His right leg, he was hitting 3. Another interesting factor here is if we look at it with that flat foot grounding, okay, almost flat foot grounding, at least dorsiflex position when he grounds, that's lengthening that window to apply a lot of force. When we're running at top speed, if we can just make that window slightly longer, that will increase our impulse, which leads to greater force production into the ground, which leads to faster running times, right? So again, let's try and focus on those 2 steps. Okay, he only had 1 there that he had a triple, so that's pretty good. Let's go through this one more time, and ideally it's like 1, 2, switch, 1, 2, switch. The other aspect here is also what we're doing with the hip. This is a movement that's gonna help him to accelerate out of the blocks if we're focusing on this hip control, this hip co-contraction. Okay, so if he has a hip lock here, switch, hip lock here, switch, it's also going to help when we come out of the blocks, him driving his knees to lengthen that stride in the start position to those first 2 to 3 key steps. There you go. That was his 3rd rep, and it took him about 3 or 4 reps. Is that your 3rd time through or your 4th? So that was his 4th time through, and he got 2 steps there. So let's do 1 more to really focus on this. And the other aspect that we didn't even mention is we always talk about dynamic trunk control. If I'm stable and I'm upright, okay, especially running at max speed, if I'm stable here, Now I have more energy going into the ground and I get that reaction back. Okay, remember the beginning where we were talking about action equals reaction, force equals MA, right? So now if we have more stable of a trunk, and that's what the hydro weight is doing, it's forcing him to be really stable and upright, that's gonna help us increase that force application. Good, 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 good. Okay, that's good. So I would recommend go through this. You can do this as a warm-up, but I also think you could do this 10 to 12 reps. We have 5 hurdles here set up. You can do this 10 to 12 reps, and it's going to drastically improve your technique and your dynamic trunk control. Okay, so Cooper's now moving into our second exercise, which is gonna be skips for distance. And ideally, what I like to do is establish a distance that can be consistent, okay? So we're gonna be at the 20-yard line here. And so the goal will be that Cooper establishes how long or how many skips it takes for him to cover that 20 yards. As we progress through 3, 4, 5 reps or 4 to 5 sets, we want to see with Cooper that stride, the amount of steps it takes to cover the 20 yards starts to decrease. So that means that he will be applying greater force into the ground, and thus he'll become faster because he's starting to master that stretch shortening cycle. So this will be Cooper's first test. We'll try and count his strides, his skips for distance, and then as we progress through it, ideally that will start to diminish as he learns and masters the better movement. I can't fucking skip. You're doing bounds. Think, boom, boom, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Does this mean I'm more athletic than you? Dude, this is how I feel some days. Maybe you're getting old, Cooper. It's too early in the morning. I was gonna bring that up. Most world record sprint times, actually Usain Bolt's, like all of his PRs were hit after 8 o'clock at night. And there's even been a lot of research around the best swimming times are typically like 8 to 10 p.m. So we're here at 8 in the morning. I think Cooper's a little fatigued. You could do like, you're forgetting to switch to the other leg. Okay, so there's something interesting going on with Cooper right now. Dude, and Cooper's like one of the freakiest athletes that we've ever trained, but he's struggling to connect his skips for distance. So he just skipped short term, okay? So what's interesting here is we talk a lot about central pattern generators. There's like, what's happening is physiologically, I don't think his motor neurons have been cut off to increase his skipping ability. The CPGs take over when you're doing something rhythmic. So what has to happen now is he's got to do a couple sets with shorter skips and then build into the skips for distance. How about you do like one more shorter one? Skippy, skippy, skippy. As soon as you're increasing your... Yeah, there you go. There, Coop. Ah! Okay, so Cooper's gonna do 20 yards of skipping so that he can learn how to apply a large amount of force. And again, I love setting a distance. 20 yards is plenty. We can skip through this. If you do skips for distance, with an established distance in place, as you work through those sets, you can count, you can use the eye test, you can count your strides with your athlete and see if they're applying greater amounts of force by decreasing the amount of strides that they're taking. Five and a half there to get across. So that was pretty good. 5.5's not bad. Yeah, that was the best one, especially for distance. Like you could see he was starting to project himself more forward. That goes back to that stride length, stride frequency. If you have a longer stride, or if you in air for a little bit longer, that goes back to the angle of takeoff. And that's gonna play a major role in what your sprint speed is gonna be. Okay, so the next exercise that we're gonna do is gonna be 30-yard single leg bounds. So we're gonna alternate in air, single leg bounding, and remember, it goes back to impulse, which is the amount of force that you can apply. Okay, so the amount of force, average, over a period of time. And that's where single leg bounds is a great skill to learn to apply a ton of force. And if you do it over a specific distance, ideally as you work through those sets, you'll have less strides being executed over that same exact distance. So if you have 30 yards that you're doing this, let's say it takes 7 to 8 strides, just hypothetically, ideally over 3 to 4 sets, you would start to lose one of those strides because you're applying greater amounts of force over a longer period of time when you're doing the bound. So single leg, but you can alternate, yeah. You mind doing 30 yards? All right. Okay, so that was pretty good, but what I would recommend there is like a little bit higher and drive that knee a little bit more. That was almost like a strider. So think like drive that knee a little bit higher, stay a little bit taller, and like see if you can project yourself forward a little more. And I think that's another big concept here, is that when we're thinking about force application or force into the ground, it comes back to stride length, stride frequency. The angle that we're gonna be projecting ourselves from all contributes into that equation of stride length and stride frequency. Okay, so that was 13 strides there. That was a lot better. 13 strides. Now we want to try and use those arms a little bit better. That was a lot more effective. So 13 strides over 30 yards. Let's try and do like 1 or 2 more and see, give you like a minute or 2 minutes rest and see if we can get that down to 12. $11 again. That's good. It's also interesting because you can see, similar to his switches, his hip switches with the hydro weight, you can see he definitely favors one side over the other. And what you can then do with that, you can look at that information and say, okay, Cooper's got an issue with one side. He just favors his strong side a little bit more. And so then when you're doing exercises in the weight room, you focus on that weak leg first. Okay, so again, we got to think about improving Cooper's ability to master stretch shortening cycles. So one of those things that we can do here is going to be a hurdle hop into double leg bound. And again, I like to use a specific distance. If we've got 10 yards, we can use the distance to see how he improves his ability to apply force. Okay, so that's the whole goal. Every session that you do when you're focusing on speed has to be based around improving impulse, okay? So that means the window, we wanna lengthen that window of ground contact just slightly, just ever so slightly, but also enhance the amount of force that we're applying into the ground for that period of time. So when you have a specific distance, you can really easily, just by the eye test, see how he's impacting that equation. And that's one of the simplest things that you can do. If you don't have access to crazy technology, you don't have force plates in your gym, you don't have even laser timing or anything like that, you can just set out 10 yards and do a drill like this. Okay, so he had 3 jumps after the bound and he landed at 11 yards. So one of the things that we can do now is, okay, 3 jumps, maybe he lands past 11 yards, or I highly doubt Cooper's gonna be able to do this, get here in 2 jumps. So that's where you can start to play. 2 jumps over 10 yards is pretty freaking deep. You wanna take a longer rest? Okay. Okay, good. So he's just past the 11-yard marker, and that was his second drill. So we'll rest a little bit and we'll do one more. We'll do a third drill here. And again, we just want to see that. So he's landing, if you look at this, the 11-yard marker, the first one he hit right here, that second one he grounded just past there. So we can already see an improvement. And then we can mark that and we can think about it and we can even put a target there. Fortunately with us being on the football field, we can see that marker really well. And that's also gonna lead, that's like that carrot that's dangling in front of the athlete. So now they can actually improve their technique, improve their skill of mastering that stretch shortening cycle, which is gonna help him increase his speed and also improve his ability to execute this drill. This cone we just set right around the 11-yard mark. So gotta get past that in 3. Ooh, almost to the 12-yard line. So that's pretty good. That's 3 sets right there. Cooper just mastered his impulse skill, his skill of improving his overall impulse, which has a massive impact of moving his body. Okay, so use all of these drills to improve your max speed, to enhance your ability to execute those stretch shortening cycles. Look at sprinting. It's not just a genetic gift. Yes, it is genetic. It can come back to executing with really clean technique. If you need help with this, you feel a little bit slow, click on the link down below in the description, head over to garagestrength.com. You can pick up our How to Get Faster sprint-based training program. Now remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.